DeepSeek shipped V4. V4 is a proof of concept for a fully parallel Chinese AI stack. So we have Chinese weights, we got Chinese chips, we have Chinese inference. No American hardware anywhere within the stack, allegedly.
Google announced the largest single company bet on an AI rival in history. And I think you can guess who that is. Same week, Amazon expanded its own Anthropic commitments, where they announced that they were doing up to 20 billion more tied to commercial milestones. And Anthropic committed to spend up to 100 billion buying roughly 5 gigawatts of Amazon compute. So I guess some of the money they're getting from Google is just going to go straight to Amazon.
It's all recursive, dude. It's all just a circle.
Well, what we're seeing here is just a consolidation of power by OpenAI and Anthropic, and we're just going to keep seeing more and more of that into the future.
And welcome back to the Pre-Train Pod. I'm Pierce Freeman.
Hey guys, it's Rich.
Rich, we were camping this weekend. Are you recovered? You managed to get some sleep last night?
Barely, dude. No, I recovered. It was great. Where did we go, Pierce? Tell our audience.
If only I knew, Richard. We went 2 hours outside of Palm Springs.
We were literally so close to the border.
Yeah, I know.
I think we were within like 10 miles or so.
Well, I think those lights literally were basically coming from the border checkpoint, right?
That's right.
We were looking in the distance and there was just this wall of lights.
Well, were you there when Cam was telling us that when he went camping the first time, Border Patrol kept circling?
Yeah, with like night vision goggles.
With a night vision goggle?
Crazy.
Yeah.
I was really hoping we'd see them, but we just saw some frat guys instead.
Maybe they were Border Patrol, dude.
I'm sure, yeah. Honestly, maybe.
Under the Trump administration, who knows?
Who knows?
Some changes.
They were undercover, dude.
They
were keeping an eye on us. They're doing a whole bit.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Rich, I think we have a good episode today. Now that we're back in civilization, we're going to be talking about the launch of DeepSeek V4. Google backs a competitor. Microsoft tears up their contract with OpenAI, and a little look at the current state of table tennis.
Dude, let's do it.
You want to jump into this?
Yeah.
All right, Richard. So last Friday, DeepSeek shipped V4. I remember it was like yesterday that they released R1.
Dude,
baby
how
R1.
they grow.
And they grow up so fast.
Now they're 4.
And the headline everywhere is obviously the leaderboard stuff. Sweetbench Verified jumped from 69 to 80.6, and it's the first open weight model closing in on 50% on Vibe Codebench. It comes in a few different flavors, but all of them seem to be mixtures of experts. There's this Flash, there's this Pro model. The Pro is the biggest at 1.6 trillion total parameters, where 49 billion are activated at any one time. Simon Wilson, who's this big tech blogger focusing on AI, pointed out that it makes the largest open weight model ever shipped, bigger than Kimi, bigger than GLM, more than double V3.2. Both big and small models handle 1 million tokens of context, and they're both MIT licensed, so properly open source, or at least open weights. Right?
Open weights.
Open weights. They did this entirely on Huawei Ascend 950s and Cambrian corn chips.
Dude, what the hell is that?
So I don't know.
What are these words?
It's definitely these domestic chips. There's no Nvidia in this.
Yeah. Get Nvidia out of there.
Yeah.
Who needs Nvidia? If it's really no Nvidia, dude, like that's insane.
Totally. And this has been a goal of all of the Chinese companies in the CCP for a while now, to like boot up the domestic silicon manufacturing industry, because for a long time, they were smuggling in these NVIDIA chips, which is fine. Like, it'll get the job done, but it was clearly this existential risk for the AI industry in China if the US ever cut that off and managed to stop the
How do you think they smuggle them in? Like in like pineapples and stuff?
Suitcases. Yeah, that's totally. Tchotchkes.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going in the store, you find some.
You're like, dude, damn it, there's an H200 in my pineapple again.
I mean, at these prices?
Yeah, honestly, it's a good
It's an
deal.
expensive banana. MIT Technology Review ran a piece Wednesday, 3 reasons why DeepSeek's new model matters. And the number one reason, which I agree with, is that V4 is a proof of concept for a fully parallel Chinese AI stack. So we have Chinese weights, we got Chinese chips, we have Chinese inference. No American hardware anywhere within the stack, allegedly.
Allegedly.
Right? Because there was also that thing where I think maybe 2 generations ago, DeepSeek claimed that they didn't train on any of these NVIDIA chips, but like, there was a little suspect as to, did they do the experiments on the chips and then just did the final one once they actually had the weights and the seeds?
Yeah, Anthropic called a tech foul on that one.
Funny. Well, I trust them as refs for sure. Pricing is about the 7th of frontier closed models. TechCrunch had the breakdown here. 14 cents per million input tokens on Pro versus $5 on GPT 5.5. But you can host them yourself. So like in theory, any price can kind of accommodate this. And to make a 1 million token window viable on that hardware, they rebuilt the attention layer from scratch to compress it on the fly. So they're calling these new techniques compressed sparse attention and heavily compressed attention. It's like real big boy compressed attention. That's a new generation.
Compressed.
So, Richard, here's where I want to land. You've been saying for months on the show that long context is fundamentally a memory problem more than a compute problem, where the bottleneck isn't really the flops. It's more what you have to do in order to keep it resident in cache, and KV cache explodes so dramatically. Do you think that that's still true with these DeepSeek models, or was this the unlock that everyone was looking for algorithmically and also on the tech side, where you can do the same amount of processing on otherwise way weaker chips?
Yeah. Well, there's two ways that you can compress memory. There's the memory compression at the layer of the weights, and there's memory compression at the layer of the KV cache. And up until I want to say 2024, so like a year or two ago, everyone thought that the way you compress memory is by compressing the weights in some clever way. So think LoRa, think QLoRa, think ReLoRa, all these adapter style approaches. So here the idea was, could we train a module that basically compresses everything that the user has talked about with the model into a small module that you attach to the model? Think like almost recording a tape, right? And then inserting that into a tape player or something like that, right? Or having a cassette that's personalized to you, and then you insert that into the cassette player, where the cassette player is the model, right? So that was kind of the thinking, was we need a separate module that contains your compressed conversation history. But if you look at the actual model and what the model is doing, all of the problems that come with language modeling come from the fact that the KV cache, so that's basically the intermediary outputs of the model, grow at this n squared rate. So as of 2025, the idea has basically been, forget the adapter stuff. No one's really working on adapters. Everyone's kind of forgotten about LoRa and QLoRa. That's old stuff at this point. The new idea is, can we take the KV cache and just compress that in some sense? So leave the model itself be.
Leave it alone.
Don't record.
Why are you messing with the model?
Don't like record this personal cassette tape that you then insert into the model. The model is fixed. What we should be changing is the intermediary checkpoints that are output by the model as it's processing your text. So that's what we call the KV cache. And let's compress that KV cache in some clever ways. And this is actually cool for two reasons. Because one, now that you're leaving the model alone, you can swap out different models and apply the same KV cache compression techniques to different models. So it doesn't matter if it's DeepSeek, if it's Qwen, if it's Llama 4, your KV cache compression algorithm is going to work exactly the same. This isn't true for ReLoRa or for LoRa or for QLoRa. Here, those methods are actually dependent on the model that you are using. KV cache is totally doesn't care about what model you use. So that's kind of nice. And you can see that a lot of labs, a lot of the neo labs actually in the Bay Area, the reason that they exist is because they think that Anthropic and OpenAI haven't figured out a good KV caching mechanism yet. So all these neo labs, I'd say maybe 40% of them, are actually just working on compressing the KV cache. That's literally what they're doing. They're not touching the model, right? And so DeepSeek trying to do this is totally in line with what American labs are already doing. Like, this is a new technology, but the fact that they've been able to do this so effectively on Chinese chips, dude, that's the crazy bit here.
Yeah.
Like, the Chinese chip part is absolutely wild.
Well, isn't the Chinese chip part the constraint that they actually do need in order to implement these approaches? Because I think the reason why maybe the American frontier labs have been staying away from the KV cache is they're all approximations. Like, the nice thing about the raw KV cache is it's literally the same thing. And maybe we should take a step back and explain exactly what this KV cache is, because it's a little different than like conventional caching approaches. If you think of like you're hitting some website and it returns a page really quickly, like you hit the cache. It's a little bit like that, but it's basically this idea that like all of this math that you have to do on each token so that it looks back on everything that happened previously, that is within the attention matrix. But we actually know how much that's going to activate, whether you're on the 10th word or whether you're on the 100th word or the 1000th word. It's like the actual thing of like in the sentence, you know, I like to eat pineapple. The like looking back at the I is going to be the same regardless of how long the string gets. You know what I mean? So in its basic form, it's like very raw forms. The KV cache is keeping an exact representation of exactly how often does that one word relate to the other one. All of these approaches are otherwise approximations. You know, like you're doing some additional.
I think it's like an intermediary
right?
checkpoint of what's been said.
Yeah. So on the chip thing, like on the Chinese chip question, do you think that they were forced into doing this because they just don't actually have the compute? They like don't have the memory on these chips to support anything bigger. So they're like, well, we've got to get really good at doing checkpointing because that's the only way that we're going to be able to have comparable performance. Versus in the US, I think every research direction pretty much that is an approximation of something that's raw is more or less thrown by the wayside. And only the efficiency gains that are exact in nature, like flash attention versus linear attention, are actually the things that get picked up by the big labs because they're numerically equivalent.
Yeah, what's that platitude? Like constraints leads to creativity or something along these lines, right? I think that there's definitely some of that going on here. But I think the reality is also, look, man, we have to get to a world where we have an infinite context window. I think everyone understands that, because if you don't have an infinite context window, you're never going to get a truly personalized AI model.
It's never going to be AGI.
It's like never going to be AGI. So forget the whole memory conversation. Like, we need infinite context windows. And for infinite context windows, you need infinite memory. So forget about memory. Like, we're never going to have infinite memory, right? So in the world in which we can't have infinite memory, the only solution is algorithmic. The only solution is to think, how can we compress history in some clever way?
Or in theory, how could we update the weights of the model? Because that is still viable. Like, that hasn't been a proved out research direction that works as well as these KV caching strategies. But in theory, like, humans are not compartmentalizing our memory. Like, you are forming new neurons across the entire surface area all the time. Even if your hippocampus is like the primary region in which memories are actually formed.
Maybe, but I would honestly push back against that. I think anything at the layer of the weights is just going to be kind of like a red herring. Because think about it this way.
But I mean, we have an existence of proof that it actually does work to update weights. But like neural connections between different inputs changing over time.
Yeah, but I think the KV cache is like the strength between the different connections, right? Which is being updated in the brain all the time too. But what you're saying here with changing the weights would be like growing a bunch of new neurons, which I don't think we have, or we don't have an existence proof of that existing.
You don't grow new neurons.
You grow connections between existing neurons.
Yeah, but I think that is keeping the overall architecture the same and then changing the activations. That's the KV cache.
I think
I think that's the whole model. In terms of if you actually like trace what it's doing. The KV cache is just activating basically for like this current sequence of words.
It's reinforcing like existing things that have been activated in the past. Is that not exactly what's happening in the brain? Whenever you're storing a memory, you're basically just reinforcing existing circuits. That is exactly what the KV cache is. LoRa or adding adapters would be like adding new neurons that you plug into your brain. That doesn't exist. I don't think, at least.
I think you do form new neurons.
Do you? I mean, someone could check us on this. But I want to say that my understanding of memory, how we think of memory in the brain, is existing neurons, existing circuits in the brain being reinforced through continuous activations, right?
I think that is true. I think there is some neuron growth, but it is de minimis when compared to the overall connections. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you actually trace the math flowing through the overall like neural circuitry, that is like a single activation. Like if you have some new stimuli that you're observing in the real world, you're looking at these pixels, it's like those are going through your brain to like whatever output is actually making you speak. And I think like the process of creating like new skills is not just adding something to your hippocampus. It's like you're reinforcing, you're actually growing new neural connections through different things. And like that pathway that's treating the input all the way to the output is the model and the KV cache in this sense, which is like more of the memory store.
Well, like I think where this kind of goes wrong is the fact that where this analogy breaks down is the fact that the brain has these sort of like recursive circuits, right? It's not just a linear, you start from here, you process it linearly, and then you have your output. The brain is doing this sort of like self-reinforcing, really complicated evolutionary search that is just not really what we're doing at all when we talk about neural networks. But from a practical level, though, and I think maybe this is more compelling, if you have a billion parameter model, which is small nowadays, right? You would agree that billion is like pretty small. That requires about on the order of like a gigabyte or so to store, right? Maybe somewhere between 1 to 4 gigabytes to actually store that, load that into your memory.
You're saying the model weights.
The model weights themselves, right? So that's like 1 to 4 gigabytes. If you then start passing text through this and you don't do anything fancy to the KV cache, within about 10,000 tokens, the amount of memory required is going to be over 100 gigabytes. So I think just from a practical perspective, that's not scalable, right?
Yeah, totally. I guess we're really saying the same thing. It's like right now with the architectures that we currently have, assuming transformer architectures and assuming transformer architectures that are based on these attention primitives that require us to have this KV lookup and these associated memories, the only way to do it feasibly based on the memory requirements is to have some compression to KV cache. The only thing that I'm saying is like, in the aggregate of time, if we're really thinking about AGI, is AGI going to look like transformer architectures that have attention as we currently think about it?
Yeah.
And that gets put into a KV cache and we have some compression on a KV cache. I don't know if I'm necessarily sold that
On
is going to be that's just going to be the future in like 5 years' time versus something dramatically different that maybe could update its own weights. I just don't think we necessarily know, but like
I think you're right, dude.
This to me is born out more out of like practical necessities of the current architectures that we've been able to scale and grow. And there's like so much research in that as long as the scaling laws keep up, it's like, well, the only way to actually make these tractable for like longer memory ranges is to have some.
Okay, 100% agree on that point. Yeah. And I think we need more dreamers, dude. Like, we should move away from transformers. There should be labs. There should be way more labs trying out moonshot projects. I'm so sick of transformers, dude.
Yeah.
They're not that interesting.
They're cache. Transformers
They're
are
cache, dude. You know?
The KV cache.
Like, where are all my gals and fellas that are trying to work on evolutionary search reinforcement learning, as a pre-training mechanism? Like, there's so much cool stuff you could be doing. And right now it feels like we have such an existence proof for transformers being so close to AGI that we're really hitting that like exploit in the exploit versus exploration trade-off.
No one's
We're just exploit.
Yeah. We're literally exploring the small little region of the KV cache.
But we know that there's so much
labs,
cool stuff just outside of the transformer like space. And no one's really touching that. A couple of folks are, but the money is still purely in transformers and autoregressive training.
Yeah, totally. It's an error of scale.
Yeah.
All right, Rich. Well, the same morning that V4 weights dropped, Reuters reported that the State Department called embassies worldwide warning about DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax. So let me read you the quote because I think the language is something here. This is OSTP Director Michael Chrysados. We've obtained intelligence that foreign actors, primarily based in China, are conducting deliberate and industrial scale activities to extract U.S. frontier systems. So this cable instructs every diplomatic post to raise these concerns with their foreign counterparts. This is weeks before Trump visits Xi in Beijing. The Chinese embassy called it a baseless allegation and, real coincidence on the timing of the V4 dropping that day. Imagine maybe
these Chinese actors, dude. They star in movies, they do plays, and then they
steal
also
our weights.
they
just steal our weeks. Come on.
Come on,
you
man.
go over to Hollywood.
What are they teaching in these like theater schools and these acting
that's
schools
so
in China, dude?
I never trust an actor, dude. You don't know what they're really thinking.
You never know.
These thespians. So what's your read on this geopolitical situation? Like they've been saying this for a while now. I guess this is nothing new. There's like large kind of state scale espionage that's both like taking some of the research takes from these labs. I heard from a friend of mine that works from one of the big labs that in some of the all hands presentations, they always call out the Chinese spies that might be in attendance. They're like, oh, and for the spies in the room.
That's so funny.
Which is kind of a funny bit. But it's like, I feel like it's an open secret basically that there are like spies. It's just we don't know who is the spy in these companies. But like there obviously are some. So it's like they're stealing both that. They haven't stolen the weights thus far for these models. But they're definitely seemingly distilling down the model architectures. That's been true. They're using them for nefarious like hacking purposes, even circumventing a lot of the safeguards that they have for these models. So what's your read? Is this anything new or is this just an extension of exactly what's been going on for some time now?
I kind of think it's an extension, dude, of what's been going on. And, in the US, we would never hear of the US spies spying on the Chinese labs. I'm sure it's reciprocal. I think we're all trying to steal each other's secrets. And frankly, the thing that's so interesting to me is that I feel like there aren't that many secrets. Like it's not like the space race where, different groups had different understandings of physics. I think we are all cooking with the same ingredients here fundamentally. So I don't know how much can be stolen. I think if there is something that is a true trade secret that US labs have, it would be in their harnesses, in like how they actually serve these models. Because there's something going on with how these models are storing different memory units and how they're performing orchestration between different subagents. That to me feels like it still has a little bit of a secret sauce component to it. But the actual training of the model, I don't know if there's really that many unique secrets that China has or that the US has.
Yeah, my read is there's probably not. And I mean, most of the Chinese models are open anyway, so we don't even maybe need spies that are sitting in like Kimi or DeepSeek. My impression is basically like what you see is what you get. They're much more interested in, I think, undercutting US by open models, kind of like they maybe did for solar, right? Like they're flooding the market with really cheap goods, undercutting American competition. And then when the American providers are no longer competing in the space, then they can jack up prices. It's like a pretty classic like subsidy and then kill strategy.
Yeah, but then again, like everyone uses Cloud Code, right? Everyone uses Codex. No one's really using whatever DeepSeek has.
I mean, I think thus far it's just not been as good. I think this is the first model that's like vaguely competitive with some of the frontier providers, but it's still last generation.
Right.
And I think until you can get to a point where it's really the best model that is out there, like everyone agrees that this is actually the best.
So I kind of disagree, dude. I think what you're seeing here is that, you can do benchmark hacking, which is what Chinese labs often will do. So they'll report amazing benchmark numbers like we see here, right? But that user experience, the qualia of actually using these coding agents is so dependent on this, like on this harness, on how they serve it, on the user experience of actually, having Claude Code as a coding buddy. Like all of that user experience side, I think there are certain trade secrets there that the Chinese labs just haven't quite figured out. And that is right now the big differentiator.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't really think so. I think those are two different things, right? Like I think they're obviously benchmark hacking. So I think the underlying model is not as good as the benchmarks make it seem, right? Like if you'd shown the same model, this SweBench benchmark like 4 years ago, like it didn't have any notion of the SweBench data set. It was fully excluded from the corpus. I just don't think it would do as good of a job. Like I think they're figuring out the formula for how these benchmarks are actually created. They're over calibrating for those tasks in the RL environment. So the numbers look rosier than they are in reality. I think the harness though, dude, like I've seen people wire up local models with these harnesses and it works in basically the same way. It's like you can hot swap out any architecture into your local codex or your local Claude Code or your local open code. There's so many of these like different orchestration solutions that to me have very similar performance because if you swap the frontier models into any of them, it does a comparable job. Like if you take the codex model and you put that in the cursor sidebar, it's also a stacked model. Or if you take Claude and you put that in open code, it's still a stacked model. Like I think actually just the model itself is better. The harness around it is, a for loop with a couple of different like tool calls injected in.
But to that point, like haven't you found that using Claude Code by itself is better than using a Claude model in cursor?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I feel like I disagree. Like I've actually just fully gone to using Claude Code and Vim.
Well, I have too, but not because I feel like the results are worse in cursor. It's just cursor charges you like a per message price. And Claude Code, it's all bundled.
It's
and
all
the
bundled.
Models can be autonomous enough to be able to
and
get through
and
all
I
the
think they're a
job.
little bit better. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Maybe it's just purely placebo, dude.
And I think you imagine that I think two things there actually that are pretty key. One is that they have trained the RL environment at this point on Claude Code histories. So it makes sense that they would calibrate the Claude Code experience to work better with Claude. That to me makes a lot of sense. It's also just proof is in the pudding. Like the chat histories are actually training on or past Claude Code transcripts, so you'd expect it to do a little bit better. But I think the other thing too of like where cursor falls flat that a lot of these other harnesses don't is that cursor, because they support so many models, instructs the model to do editing in a unique way where it has it write comments, almost like a simplified diff, like a Git diff. It writes the full text that you're going to find and replace into your document. And Claude Code and Codex have all gravitated to just find and replace tool calls because they found that the internal circuits of the model are better for doing a separate find and replace than doing this like weird diff thing. So I actually think
that resonates.
That might account for like a lot of the difference of why cursor's worse, despite getting this $20 billion investment from SpaceX, which we're not talking about this week. But
well, dude, talking about X $billion deals.
Yeah, dime a dozen, really.
Well, did you hear about what happened with Google?
Refresh my memory.
All right, so Google announced the largest single company bet on an AI rival in history. And I think you can guess who that is. So Bloomberg broke this story, and they said that Google was investing up to $40 billion into Anthropic. So the way that this basically breaks down is, so that's $10 billion in cash mula dinero at a 350 billion valuation.
Which is quite a subsidy based on what they're trading at currently, right? Like
Yeah.
they're almost $1 trillion on the secondary.
That's what people are saying.
So,
exactly.
yeah, it's only a third.
And then
It's a
there's
good deal.
another 30 billion in dinero contingent on undisclosed performance milestones. Plus, as a little bonus, as a little sign-on
Oh
bonus,
yeah.
5 gigawatts
Sweeten
of
the deal.
TPU capacity, including 7th gen Ironwood chips. Kind of a bad day to be Nvidia, dude. Right?
Yeah, I know.
You got the
Seriously,
Chinese showing
chips.
that they don't really need your Nvidia chips. They don't need nickel, right? They don't
Mhm.
need QBlast. Like they can do their own thing. And now you got Google basically pushing TPUs down Anthropic's throat. Were they already using TPUs? I want to say
They were.
They were,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
they had a heterogeneous cluster.
Yeah,
pretty early
yeah,
on.
which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I've always been a friend of those. All right, so now Pierce, same week, Amazon expanded its own Anthropic commitment. So this you might have heard about. This was I feel like made a massive splash on my Twitter, where they announced that they were doing up to 20 billion more tied to commercial milestones. And Anthropic committed to spend up to 100 billion buying roughly 5 gigawatts of Amazon compute. So I guess some of the money they're getting from Google is just going to go straight to Amazon.
It's all recursive,
It's all
dude. It's all
recursive,
just a
dude.
circle.
So Amazon puts money in, Google puts money in, Anthropic commits to spend 100 billion back on Amazon's cloud.
Okay.
So if you add it all up, Anthropic is sitting on something like 65 billion in pledge equity and 10 gigawatts of reserve trading power.
Crazy.
So huge. They're-
Also inference power, probably. Right?
Yeah.
Like I imagine they're going to dedicate a lot of these chips to just serving their existing models.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, you can repurpose these easily. Anyway, so the timing of this is all pretty interesting. This all dropped the same week Anthropic previewed Mythos, the model that famously they've been withholding because the Saper capabilities
Yeah, we're
are,
still
quote,
trying to get
just
access,
so
man.
sick.
They're not giving me access. I'm like, cow, what's up?
I know, dude. So
Just hit me with
Friday,
that feature flag.
So Friday was pretty crazy. Anyway, Doc, so here's my question to you, right? They put in 10 billion of cash for almost no incremental governance. Google gets no board seat, no observer, capped at 15%. What do you think they're actually buying? Is this a hedge against losing the model race? Like, what do you think?
I mean, I think this is such a smart deal, honestly, right? Where Google is giving Anthropic what Anthropic probably needs the most right now, which is just additional compute. I think they've been so saturated on their existing compute clusters, which is the rumor of why they're having to lower the limits that people are allowed to use on Cloud Code, or like the Cloud Code experience is degrading. I'm always a little bit suspect at those claims, especially when they're anecdotal. They published a blog post admitting to at least some of the issues, but they were because of harness regressions, not because of the actual model being degraded. So I think it's really smart for Google to say, we recognize the area that you're most behind OpenAI is actually not really in money. Like you could raise that on the secondary markets or in your IPO later this year pretty easily. Where you're really behind is in TPUs. It's like in compute capacity, right? And I think it makes sense for Google to be pushing their own agenda there and giving them access to TPUs and get a new client for that, instead of giving them access to their reserved GPU capacity that Google also has access to, that they're probably reserving more for internal projects. So Google's one of the big owners of GPUs and TPUs worldwide. They're the only owners of TPUs. Like they invented the technology and they know how to use it better than anyone, which is pretty useful too for integration. They wrote JAX, which is like the first class native language to really be able to run code on TPUs. So they're getting this money from Google. They're getting this money from Amazon. And a lot of those are in kind of reciprocal relationships where Anthropic's getting access to the compute from those two providers. Also, the two biggest cloud providers that have GPUs. I think the other one's probably Microsoft with Azure, but like they've had such a long relationship with OpenAI. I still think Anthropic's probably using some of Microsoft's chips too. So like they're just trying to go out and sign deals with whoever
The more compute,
actually
the
has
better.
existing
More
compute
energy,
capacity,
more compute.
more energy, more compute, and importantly, compute that is online today and not some future promise of compute that they still have to build up in 2 years. You know, like they're training these models now, they're hosting them now. And I think they want providers that already have that online versus these like very futuristic agreements with like Nebius or CoreWeave, where they might have to put some money up front, but they're not going to see the returns. They're not going to see the yields for like years at a time at this point. So I think that's like smart move number one. I think smart move number two, though, specifically for Google, is that Google already owned about 14% of Anthropic. Like they put money in, I think like 2 years ago into one of these early rounds.
They're doing great.
So
Google's investment arm is
fantastic
student loans.
ROI. Yeah, I know. I wonder if they did this through GV or just the Google company. It's kind of
Either
interesting
way,
where it is on the balance sheet, but it's like For a while, Yahoo stock was only held up by the fact that they owned so much Alibaba. You remember this?
Oh, was it?
Yeah, they bought like 20% of Alibaba in the early days. And Yahoo, obviously, no one uses anymore. There's no ad revenue.
Yeah.
So I think my mom might still use Yahoo. But like, aside from my mom,
Aside from
no
your
one's really
mom.
using Yahoo.
Right.
And the stock was basically held afloat because like it was a shell vehicle. It was like almost an SPV in order to get access to Alibaba stock before they IPO'd.
It's like Allbirds, dude.
AI birds.
AI birds now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the reason why they did this investment structure is that this new tranche is engineered and, engineered by very expensive antitrust lawyers to keep the total at or below 15%, because it's usually this 15% threshold that has additional reporting requirements. And they don't take any board seats. They don't have any observer rights. So it's calibrated just under whatever HSR and CMA merger review thresholds would probably trigger some process, either like governmental or otherwise, right? So that's step number 2.
Clever.
And then 3 is like, yeah, I think them hedging against the internal Gemini is probably a good idea. Or even if Gemini models are becoming stronger and stronger each generation, enterprises are really still defaulting to go to Claude. Like maybe this is just a recognition that the model is not otherwise the defendable thing here. It's industry sentiment. It's these long-term futures contracts. And Anthropic has been beating Google into the absolute dust with those for the last year and a half at this point.
What do you think of OpenAI's relationship with Cerebras, though? Because have you played with 5.5 at all?
Just like using it in a codex harness?
Yeah.
Yeah. Use it all the time.
Dude, it's like a fundamental UX step change, 2 step changes.
Really?
Oh my God, dude. Like the speed with which these tokens come out. You know, when you're coding,
I think it's slower. What mode do you have it set to? Like what's your thinking level?
I don't know, whatever the default is.
Okay.
I just
like
reset up
or
codex.
something. Yeah.
I mean, dude, it's so fast. And that is purely because of Cerebras.
They're not hosting 5.5 on Cerebras, I don't think.
Are they not?
No. I think Spark they are. Are you using 5.5?
I must be using Spark.
Okay. Yes.
Whatever
Spark's
Cerebras is
blazing
doing
fast.
is blazing fast.
Yeah.
So fast that it is a UX 10x. It's not even like the speed. It's the user experience of not moving your eyes away from the terminal because the text is already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that is a game changer. And I kind of feel like, if everyone's cooking with the same ingredients, but OpenAI has access to this new chip style, I feel like that's a way to compete, I wonder if TPUs are going to be the same thing for Anthropic. If they can really get that inference to match OpenAI's Spark.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think TPUs are really calibrated to doing this.
I'm just surprised that no one's freaking out about this step change in speed. All of my buddies are just kind of taking this for granted. I kind of feel like the speed with which tokens come out change how you interact with coding agents, period, full stop.
Fundamentally, yeah.
Because if the text is just there, you never have to parallelize your mental thread. You can just single thread through a problem until you get to the solution, and it ends up being much faster than trying to do what most people do, which I don't know if folks know this, but most people now have 3 Claude terminals up at the same time, type it in one window, wait a minute while that finishes. While that's kind of doing its thing, you literally turn your gaze to the next terminal, type something in, turn your gaze to the next terminal. It's kind of brutal, dude. It's not that fun, right?
Yeah, you're just constantly context switching.
If you're typing somewhere and then the text is just there magically, first of all, it feels really magical. It's a completely different UX experience. And 2, you don't have to context switch. And so you can just keep churning, your own mental tokens on the same problem without having to context switch. I think for me, it's a huge game changer.
Yeah. Well, I think it means that you're spending time on the actual compute heavy parts of your pipeline. If you're working on some Rust project, you're going to be compiling code for the majority of time. You're not going to be waiting for token generations. And the latest generation of really big models, I was generating something with Opus 4.6 or 4.7 this morning. It was brutally slow. It was writing maybe 4 paragraphs and took 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Those paragraphs. I mean, I was just waiting. I was like, should I get some coffee? Should I step away from my computer? Slow token generation, I think, will kill these models at the extreme, even if they are really smart. Maybe people will put up with them, but I think if you have the advantage of being able to have the same level of intelligence at a significantly, a noticeably faster rate, which these Cerebras chips are, I also think hosting on these Grok chips from Nvidia will also give you that speed up. You're right, that might be the difference of actually who wins the day in this inference race. If you're intelligence is kind of a commodity. How fast am I going to be able to consume that intelligence and at what cost? which these inference specialized chips are really giving you the best of both worlds. Like they're both faster and they're both cheaper. I guess really the Grok acquisition was an acknowledgement from Nvidia of like they're just not competitive in this inference race anymore. And they had to bring someone in from the outside and like bring in a chip architecture from the outside in order to try to make a play here.
We'll see what happens, dude. But I feel like people just aren't talking enough about how it's just an absolute UX experience game changer when you have something show up immediately.
Well, Richard, Anthropic isn't the only one restructuring. Seems like a season of restructuring for the Frontier Labs. Monday morning, so yesterday, at least at record time, Microsoft and OpenAI announced that they've rewritten their foundational deal. This 2019 partnership was the signature partnership between the two companies and a really deft move by Satya, which ended up giving Microsoft a veto over OpenAI's commercial reach. That's all gone. That's in the past.
It's in the past.
They're moving in the future.
No more.
VentureBeat called it the most significant restructuring since the original billion-dollar investment and described the old arrangement as one of the most lopsided technology licensing deals in modern history, which I kind of agree. It was an absolute masterstroke as they were switching this commercial model. Before I tick through the changes, I want to set some context because this didn't happen in a vacuum. So in February, OpenAI announced that Amazon was investing up to $50 billion in OpenAI. In March, the FT reported that Microsoft was considering legal action against OpenAI because the Amazon deal conflicted with the old exclusivity terms that were baked in their contract, which seems obvious.
That seems obvious.
That that's a contract violation. Earlier this month, OpenAI's revenue chief, Denise Dessier, sent an internal memo telling staff that the Microsoft partnership, quote, limited our ability to meet enterprises where they are because a lot of people are trying to use Amazon or trying to use GCP in order to actually do the hosting. And because they're not in the walled garden and they require these external API keys, that stops them from being able to get some of these clients. So this restructuring is a settlement of a fight that's been building for months, maybe even years if you think of the open versus closed fight that they've been having for the restructuring of the overall company.
Totally.
So now the specific changes. OpenAI can serve all products across any cloud provider. That's probably the big one. Microsoft's IP license goes non-exclusive but runs through 2032. So they still have access, but it's non-exclusive. Microsoft stops paying revenue share to OpenAI. OpenAI continues paying 20% back to Microsoft through 2030, now subject to a cap that no one's disclosed. And the AGI clause, which is probably the most famous part of the original agreement, which basically said that the second that OpenAI releases a model that actually is AGI, Microsoft no longer gets a piece of that pie. Like AGI belongs exclusively to OpenAI. Microsoft doesn't get it. And now Microsoft doesn't get it at all. The clause is totally gone. Microsoft can no longer determine its response if OpenAI declares AGI. VentureBeat was talking about this old one and said that it was a philosophical tripwire embedded in a business contract.
It's just weird. It's like, how do you even define this thing?
Yeah, no, totally.
How can you have a legal document based off of an amorphic concept?
It was insane. No one knew what it meant. So anyway, they kept the primary cloud partner framing in the new contract. OpenAI products will ship first on Azure, quote, unless Microsoft cannot or chooses not to support the necessary capabilities, which to me provides a pretty gaping escape hatch that's wide enough to drive an AWS data center through. Like they can go to whoever they want to host whatever model at any time. So Richard, here's what I actually want your take on, and then the broader question. Both Frontier Labs are now dual hyperscalers. So OpenAI and Anthropic are now sitting on both clouds with capped obligations to their primary provider. The one lab, one cloud era is totally dead at this point. Does that make Frontier AI more competitive? Or does it just mean that Amazon and Google are now co-investing in their own disruption?
Yeah, I mean, look, man, I think that as these labs are getting bigger, they have more leverage. And frankly, the original deals that were struck were just not really in their favor. And so now OpenAI is able to really define things even more on their own terms than before. I think the leverage that they have over Microsoft is that Microsoft, what do they have? They have their 5.4 models. They have some other, they have like their Azure compute, but in some sense, I think Microsoft is kind of in a weaker position than they've ever been in the AI race. And OpenAI can exploit that. I think that this is just, the free market doing its thing. And frankly, Microsoft having to take the weaker stance here and accept that OpenAI is just frankly, probably more valuable company than they at this point and can dictate these contracts even more on their own terms. I think what we are going to see at some point, is potential monopoly lawsuits against OpenAI and Anthropic if they keep growing at the pace that they are currently growing and dictating how compute terms are set. It seems like, power is being consolidated more and more into these two labs. the existing big players are having to accept their weaker position. It's only a matter of time before OpenAI really controls a big share of, the US energy grid and compute providers, and can really dictate terms in a way that could be bad for, free market competition. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but apparently about 50% of energy demand now is just coming from new data centers being built.
So crazy.
And for the first time, energy providers are actually, I think, at a net short of around like 20 gigawatts or something like this. This is the first time in history that energy providers have signed agreements that they can't, actually fulfill. And it just shows that we're reaching the point at which the limits of physics have to be pushed. We have to create new sources of energy. And if someone's going to do that, it is going to be probably these big labs, right? At some point, you could imagine that these labs are going to be the ones that are going to innovate on things like, new fusion technologies, new fission technologies, right?
I mean, Altman's a huge investor in Helios.
Exactly, dude. And so
no coincidence.
I think what we're seeing here is just a consolidation of power by OpenAI and Anthropic. And we're just going to keep seeing more and more of that into the future. My prediction is that in the next 5-10 years, we're going to be seeing some antitrust monopoly lawsuits against these companies. And I think that this is kind of that first domino that we're seeing already.
I think that's probably a pretty good bet. I mean, they've already used up or are eating up all the compute capacity that we pretty much have access to and are back ordered for so much more. It's forcing neolabs to compete more in this efficiency area and actually coming up with algorithmic advancements than like trying to go toe to toe. And I think that that's something that's new, at least in technology. You know what I mean? Like Google became dominant, not really because they had access to more compute than anybody else, although they did pretty early on. But I think it's just their algorithms were better. Like in theory, if someone came out with a way better page rank that just was better at search, they probably would have won the search day. If Bing came out and just had extraordinarily good results, I could have seen people migrating. I don't know. Like there's not that big of a moat. This is a big moat. This is like a physical infrastructure moat of both the data centers and the GPUs and the TPUs. And for the most part, they're going to these big providers instead of small ones. In terms of the question of does it make it more competitive? Like, I find it interesting that Microsoft gave into this deal because they actually didn't have to, if you think about it, right? Like they had a contract on the books with OpenAI. They could have just seen that through. Like they could have just refused to fold, legally speaking, right? Like the negotiating power is kind of interesting because that usually only works if you have some net new agreement that you're trying to sign, or if you're trying to restructure it to be more beneficial to you. But like they could just not have signed this new thing. There's definitely some interesting element here of as OpenAI goes through this conversion process from being a nonprofit to being a for-profit, or like being a nonprofit that controls a for-profit arm. I wonder maybe if there was a little bit of questioning on Microsoft's side as to if they were going to miss out on some of the gains of this for-profit if the judges allow that through, because the original agreement that they signed was with the nonprofit. And maybe this ended up being the best deal that they thought they could get and not miss out on the gains.
To me, this feels like Microsoft is using this agreement almost like a debt structure now rather than an equity play, right? So they've increased the percent of revenue share up to some undisclosed cap, right? So we don't really know what that is. So it kind of feels like, is the play that Microsoft thinks that OpenAI is just more, less cash sensitive than before, has more cash, can actually pay out on this initial deal? I think it objectively does. But does Microsoft need that cash? Is Microsoft trying to, make some big cash play that requires a lot of upfront capital?
Yeah.
Are they trying to repurpose this cash to invest in their own models and their own energy infrastructure?
Almost certainly not. I mean, Microsoft is so cash rich right now. Like I think Apple is the only company that's more cash rich than Microsoft. Maybe like Berkshire has more, but hugely profitable. They've been crushing it in the markets for the last like 10 years running. I think this was probably something about the actual legalese of it all, if I had to guess. And it also might have been the fact that like, it's better to own a smaller piece of a bigger pie than own a bigger piece of a shrinking pie. I wouldn't be surprised if it was an acknowledgement of like, they just don't have the compute capacity internally. Like GCP and Amazon have more compute that are up for grabs. And they were like, well, we're hamstringing our own investment with these deal terms. Like, go off, little bird, fall out of the nest, fly to some other data centers that actually have compute capacity.
It feels like a net loss for Microsoft.
I don't
think there's a good way to frame this, really.
It's crazy that almost a year ago at this point, or maybe a little bit longer, there was a whole kerfuffle about Altman being forced out of OpenAI and then Microsoft offering him a job to lead their own AI practice. Like, that was so close to happening.
Can you imagine? That would be a much more interesting world in some sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. If they were able to snipe up that talent, so everyone would have left with him. Every talented OpenAI person probably would have left.
Now Microsoft would just probably be one of the monoliths.
Absolutely dominant. Although, interesting. One of these things, it's like maybe the morass at the big companies would have slowed OpenAI down, or would have made them question the Sora release. Like,
that's a good point.
Such an interest. Like, why would Microsoft release that?
Why would they, right? I mean, who knows? But I do wonder, like, was Sora feels like a failure. I think most people would agree. But maybe the technology that was powering Sora actually let GPT 5.5 now be one of the best image generators in the world.
That's a good point.
Maybe that's been the whole play, this whole time. Like, let's just create products and let's see how they do. And the takeaways, the learning lessons from creating those products are going to inform the new models.
Yeah. We're definitely in an early Google era. I think both at OpenAI and Anthropic. You see like Anthropic Labs releasing Claude Design.
That's true.
I really think that they are trying to figure it out alongside the rest of us of how do we profit from these models.
Let's just make a bunch of products and see what's
totally. It's like coding, obviously you've reached PMF. Everything else, I don't think quite yet. So I think they're still working on it.
All right, Pierce. Moving on to something a little bit maybe more lighthearted. ChatGPT cracked a decades-old math problem. I don't know if you saw this, but the TLDR is that there's basically this 23-year-old kid, Liam, at the University of Cambridge, who has no formal math training.
Did you know him?
No, I don't know Liam. He's a little younger than me at this point.
That's true. That's a good point.
But what he did have was a ChatGPT Pro subscription. And so what Liam did is he cracked this Erdős problem from 1196. Erdős was this mathematician back in the day who basically created a whole series of what he believed would be unsolvable problems. Like, it would take millennia to solve these problems. So there's a whole list of these.
And did he write 1,196 of these? Like, did he start from zero and say, this is my first question? This is my second one?
These tend to be problems in, I suppose, like real analysis and set theory mostly.
Yeah.
So when you're working on, it's been a while since I took like a math class in college, but there's a lot of problems where you say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had some solution to this thing? We just don't know how to solve it. And if we could solve this, then we could also solve these other 10 problems, but we also don't know those, right? So like these problems kind of like stack on each other in some sense. Like, they're not completely independent questions. They're kind of all related to this like bigger thing that they're trying to solve.
He actually did write many thousands of these. So that numerical index, that 1196, is like actually the question in this category.
Yeah.
Like, he has many thousands of other questions, some of which are solved and some of which are unsolved.
It's crazy, right? Yeah.
It's like, how did you just whip these up?
Well, he was probably, I guess my point was like, he was trying to solve some other thing.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Along the way, he's coming up with these questions.
That's still crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy.
Thousands.
I guess I had a lot of time back in the day, So the problem that they're trying to solve here is about like primitive sets, which are like these numbers where no element divides another. And there's this idea of like computing something called the Erdős sum, which is like a sum that is computed on these primitive sets. And there's some conjecture about like what limit does this sum approach? Okay, I think that's all kind of we have to understand for the point of this. A lot of people try to solve this. Folks have spent like years of their PhDs trying to solve this. And this kid Liam was able to solve it by just prompting ChatGPT 5.4, zero shot, and it spat something out. So once he did that, Liam, and we don't really know exactly what the order of operations was here, but Liam saw this output. He said, "Oh my God, this is incredible! Like I think I solved it." And then imagine someone must have told Liam, "Hey, well, why don't you sanity check this with someone who might actually be able to verify whether this is a good proof or not?" Because it should be stressed, like it's hard to generate a proof. Sometimes even harder to verify whether that proof is legit or not. Like the verification problem sometimes can be harder than the proof generation problem.
Totally.
Because in order to verify it, not only do you have to like rederive the proof, you have to like analyze whether the proof was done correctly or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I feel like a lot of the really complex proofs often rely on lemmas that either now have been lost to time or the lemmas themselves were not correctly proved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, therefore, it's kind of like a folding deck of cards. Like often people want to disprove the lemmas or prove the lemmas because the bigger thing that the lemmas will end up leading up to is dependent on that lemma. And if you can invalidate the lemma, then you're like, oh, well, all of the proofs that rely on this are wrong themselves.
So the only person who they felt was a good arbiter of the validity of this proof is, you might know him, Terrence Tao. He's been making a lot. He's been making a lot of podcast appearances. He was on Darkesh's podcast. I think he's a public persona on X. Very talented mathematician, currently thought of as maybe like one of the best mathematicians in the whole world. And what he had to say about this was, he said that the proof itself was quite poor, but there was like some really key ideas in there that were actually worthy of being called a sub-proof in some sense of what was being tried to prove here. So what I imagine Terrence Tao must feel like is like when you read a good story with awful writing, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I think I get it.
Good
it's
plot
like,
line.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, I think I see the
Needs
point
an
here,
editor.
but the way it's written is awful, right?
Totally.
It's like the Harry Potter books. I don't know if I'm going to get hate for this, but
You're definitely going to get some hate.
I was trying to read these as an adult. I'm like, dude, the writing here is awful. The plot is sick.
Yeah.
The writing is terrible.
Could be better.
Right? But people...
It was a children's book. It was a young adult.
No, I know, but like, I don't know.
Richard's this erudite looking at proofs. He's like, oh no, I need this.
No, I tried reading Harry Potter like as a 25-year-old, several years back for the first time, and I was like, God, this is tough, dude. But no, so Terrence was basically like, I think the proof is here. The writing is awful, but I think I get it, and I think we can call this as a valid proof at this point. Like we can call this like a complete but badly written proof of this problem. That was his TLDR, which is huge. And so here's my question to you, Doc. Is the capability here that the model is actually showing actual reasoning? Or is it something more like, I guess, what you would call de-anchoring?
I think it's kind of reasoning here, man. I mean, I've not seen an explanation yet that would prove that it's doing something else compellingly. I saw the discussion about this on Hacker News, and a lot of people were speculating that the student Liam actually injected in some of his own information in this, and then it just fleshed out with a little bit of deep research. And, Liam basically guided it to the solution, which you see on some of these proofs that actually do end up being pretty successful. Like you'll pair a professional mathematician with one of these systems, and they'll end up workshopping a net new proof. But it was based on some deeper insight that the expert had about, like, you should probably look in like this domain or like pull up this literature or do something. This basically was from scratch. I mean, it was through this prompting process that Liam has been working on for a while now, of telling the model where to look, where not to look, and selectively feeding it the information in the proof, but suggesting that it doesn't look at existing prior art. Obviously, that's going to be baked into the weights on some degree, but like you often end up in cycles, I think, in math research where everyone will go down one rabbit hole, and the person that actually solves the problem ended up looking into another field for another batch of insights. So it actually just happens a lot of like science or research more broadly. So he encouraged ChatGPT to do that. But aside from that, it was basically just Chat doing research and coming up with this theory on its own. I think what you said about like, they had to do a lot of cleanup on this. Like the model skipped some steps. It was not valid as a proof. It wasn't even just bad writing of the proof, but it was actually like some of the things that the model was relying on just like weren't right. And if you submitted this to a conference, even if people could kind of like grep the math, it just like wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. But the like core idea of what it was pulling from, which I think was like some Monte Carlo based approach in order to solve this, it was like that core insight was something that no one had tried for this problem before, wasn't in the corpora. Model decided to give it a go and was like, okay, I think this is actually pretty reasonable. So
the way that Terrence spoke about this is that everyone had, when they were trying to solve this proof, they were basically taking like the first turn was a wrong turn that everyone was taking. Like you were trying to navigate to this location and you would just immediately, every mathematician, because of their training, would just go right when you actually had to go left to start finding the solution. And because this model isn't trained as a formal mathematician, it was just exploring different things and happened to have turned left. skipped some steps, but then kept going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's right.
And Terrence could then see, oh, I see. So it went left here, and then there's a gap, but then I can see where it continued on from here. So let me just fill in that little stretch that's missing. And then there you go. There you have the proof. Right?
Totally.
So it's kind of cool to see how collaborative this process has been. This has been the dream, like the gold star for the longest time. Like true collaborative new science discovery has been basically what DeepMind was founded to solve, right? And we're starting to see new proofs being developed as a result of the collaboration between AI and humans.
Yeah, which I think is pretty cool. That's like a good intersectionality between what people do really well and then also what machines do.
Yeah.
I thought one bit about this that was kind of interesting is in this prompt that they use in order to do this math research, they instruct it to make no mention.
Make no mistakes. So actually, we've been able to solve all of science.
Make no mistakes. You should make no mention of it being an Erdős or open problem in your search queries. You can search for things around this area, but you can't search for anything related to the actual problem because you don't want to be biased by what people have done before. One cool thing I think in all of this is this pipeline is fully auditable. You obviously don't know about what it has baked into the weights and what it's drawing from to inform what it actually does end up searching for. But you can very easily invalidate if it does do some query that says solutions to the Erdős problem. You can just strip that from the transcript. You know what I mean? There's definitely something net new about being able to know exactly where all of these insights came in one context history, that if you're delegating this problem to a PhD that's in your research lab or something, they're mostly just drawing from memory. I mean, they're probably reading a little bit of additional material to get familiar with this area, but there's no sense of I'm literally just going to, on my desk, have 50 books laid out that are all looking at different areas of math, have them in my own context window at one time, and then make some new insight. It's just not, obviously, it's not how research works.
Right.
And that is what these models are doing. So it's this high recall element of what the models are able to do, a little bit of creative problem solving. I don't know. I wonder if someone like Tao would be able to come to the same conclusion if you gave him these different papers of input in front of him. I assume so.
At the limit, but probably, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know what nut of here was informed by the search queries that it did that just happened to stumble upon the right thing, and which were actually some deep intuition that the model had. Probably more of the former than the latter, but I think this is totally reasoning. I think this counts.
I think that's right. I mean, what is reasoning other than combining previous pieces of past information in some new way? Right?
That's right. Yeah. Totally. Okay, Rich. Last thing. I think this is pretty cool. And this is mostly an excuse to play an incredible clip. But I'll tell you what happened. So the Sony AI paper outplaying elite table tennis players with an autonomous robot. I don't know if there's an acronym in there because that's just so verbose. But they're calling this Project ACE.
OTPA.
Yeah. That's
OTPA.
Our 5 years of work. It's an event-based vision system. Uses sensors, deep RL, and an 8-joint robotic arm to play table tennis against the pros. Which honestly would just be such a fun research project to work on for someone who likes table tennis.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You had some of the academics that are in the lab.
What do you think is the product that Sony's working on here?
I have no idea.
What do the Sony folks
do?
The
Sony research group, they're just trying to defeat humans at every turn.
Yeah.
They came out with some basketball playing robot this past week too. I'm
they just hate humans.
What are they cooking, man?
It's cool. I mean,
I will say it's very Japan, I think, to watch robots do things as the competition. I don't know how well it would play in the US to have two robots fighting against each other, but bot battles have long been a thing.
But there's humans controlling them, right?
No, autonomous bot battles.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. There are also the bot battles that humans control, which I feel are pretty popular anywhere. But anyway, let me show you this clip. I think this is pretty sick. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
But not flawless though.
Wow.
They had this one simulation of where it thinks it's going to go versus where it actually does. And you can see it adjusting in real time
that's so cool.
to updates on this prior momentum angle.
Yeah.
I don't know. On one hand, it's not shocking to me that this works because it does feel it's Newtonian motion. You know what I mean? Once it actually hits the racket, you can model where it's going to go just based on where you're observing the velocity. I guess there's
I think
probably
it's the
something.
speed of the arm that is the most impressive part.
Figuring out exactly like what angle you want to hit it to like land in the right place that it will make them lose is probably the biggest thing to me. Because if you wanted to say deterministically, it should always go there. I think that'd be a pretty easy algorithm to solve for in closed form. But I think having the robot look at the other person, say they're actually over to the right, it's going to be very hard for them to get close to the net on the left. I'm going to aim for there instead. And this end-to-end RL system to solve for this is pretty freaking cool.
You know what they're currently missing that is a big part of table tennis, at least the way I've played it? The trash talking.
Yeah, that's right.
I just don't think these robots really quite have
Can
it,
you imagine Siri saying,
You
are
very bad.
subpar ball movement,
That's right,
Richard.
Yeah, we got to get our best and brightest working on the
or some
trash
just
talking.
really posh British accent, which is how I have my Siri.
Yeah,
configured.
exactly.
Oh, how
How loathsome.
that's right.
Wait, so your Siri is British?
It is. Yeah.
Oh, wow, look at that.
It feels like Jarvis. You know, what I mean?
You're a
I can
refined-
pretend.
you're
I can
a
close
refined
my
gentleman.
eyes. Yeah, well, I appreciate it.
Incredible, dude.
It was the only voice that I could stand on chat, to be honest.
Yeah,
the other ones are
truly.
just like so. They're so like airy.
Dude, same here on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Like the only voice I love is the British.
Yeah,
dude.
well, that's kind of that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, you are right, Chat.
As a matter of fact,
Maybe it's just like our
Way more
ingrained
likely to
sense that
believe it.
British
That's right.
accents are still smart. You know what I mean?
way more proper. I'm like, you
way
must have spectacles.
This guy knows what he's talking
That's
about.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I never challenged it. I told him to make no mistakes.
Exactly. Well, that's the trick. This is cool, man. I mean, I think the one thing that's worth talking about here is how like far behind we are in terms of robotics in the US, you know? Like I kind of feel like a lot of the innovation will come in building really good robots for manufacturing. And you can see, I mean, you can obviously see this table tennis robot, how that will translate perfectly into some manufacturing arm in the future, right? I imagine that that's probably the product that Sony's trying to ship here. And the dexterity and finesse of this arm is very impressive. And I feel like that has been an unsolved problem for American robotics labs. I think somehow the Asian labs have just figured this out way more than we have.
Yeah, ironically, it's not really as much a software constraint anymore. I think people were thinking that figuring out how you could train a system to be as dexterous, something that looks like a human hand or can function as a human hand, is going to all be on the software and RL side.
I think it's a lot of it's hardware and engineering.
I think it's
you know?
mostly hardware. Turns out millions of years of evolution actually made us a pretty good hand.
It is very
Pretty
impressive.
superior hand.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
At least for dexterity, you know, and flexibility. I feel like you can obviously make a robot with like more torque or like more pressure.
Yeah, of
easily,
course.
But like actually making
The fine motor movements are
so hard to do.
so hard, and the fact that we can do it as humans is actually like fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, it is one of our superpowers. You know, the way that you like talk about how, you know, dogs can like see smells, right? Or that they can like, you know, hear all these different sounds that we can't hear, how like certain animals have, you know, infrared vision. I feel like humans, the way we operate in the world is only possible because of our fine-grained motor movements, right? That in conjunction with our, you know, prefrontal cortex has made us very, very capable as far as like biological systems.
Yeah.
And
totally.
we've talked for a long time about how the human brain is so impressive, but I think human motor movement is also just fascinating.
Mhm. The whole muscle structure. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm always a little suspicious when a lab comes out with a product that looks like a human hand to do things in the real world, because yes, we did create the world for us to interoperate in. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that hands are going to be the unit of currency for doing things. That being said, are they really the most optimal structure to be doing mass manufacturing? I think probably the answer is no. I think it's going to be like hand V2,
Yeah.
or maybe like a hand unit that can actually be adapted to different tasks is going to end up looking pretty different from like a human hand. But yeah, robots, man, they're coming for us.
They're coming for us, dude.
Optimus.
They'll
When are they
take over.
releasing it? Next year.
Something like that.
I mean,
Pretty soon.
people have these hanging
I know.
around their homes.
I know,
It's
it's
kind of crazy.
We're starting, man.
You gonna get one? You're already in the Tesla ecosystem.
I think
bet it will
I
sync
think
with
I'm
your car.
good for now, dude.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think I'll pass.
I feel
but
that.
We'll see. Well, on that joyful note,
Yeah,
dude,
on the robots taking
on
over.
the robots take. I'll see you next week,
Yeah,
boss.
we need to get to our
Pleasure's
jobs
always.
while the robots
While the
haven't taken
robots
them
are
yet.
still playing table tennis.
Yeah, that's exactly
dude.
right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you guys focus on that.
You
know?
guys just get really good
Take
at
my
that.
hobbies and I'll go
exactly.
work.
I'll go work for
That's
now.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
All right,
man.
boss.
Till next week.
Till next week.
Bye.
Bye.